So I'm just going to ask straight up, is the wide receiver room at Texas A&M good enough for the Aggies to achieve their highest aspirations on the season? Most people that break this team down highlight various aspects of the team for strengths and weaknesses, and strengths are D-line, quarterback, secondary improvement. Weaknesses might be offensive line, consistency of certain players. Is Connor Wegman fully healthy? But no one really mentions the receiver room in either one of these categories. I think it's a need more context position. However, I think we do have quite a bit of context amongst the guys at the top of this room. So today, continuing with our theme of breaking down the position groups of the team going into the season, we're going to talk about the receiver room. So like and subscribe if you like this kind of content. We'll continue to break this team down as we approach the start of the season, which is right around the corner. We're getting so excited. But let's start with the starters. Noah, Moose, Jade. Somewhat of known commodities. However, we haven't seen any of these guys remain consistent. I think the most consistent of the three was actually Jade, and that's kind of surprising considering he was a Grand Valley State transfer last season, and he kind of bust onto the scene pretty early. So impressive stuff. But we've seen greatness from all of them, whether it was Noah and his 3-touchdown performance to start the year last year, winning the MVP of Spring 2022, having the spring game that he did this 2023 offseason, 2024 offseason, the most recent spring game. We've seen Moose Muhammad take games over. But like I said, we haven't seen someone do it snap to snap, game to game. But there's a level of excitement about this trio. I'm going to talk about each one of them, break down their game, kind of give context, give history, a lot of stuff that you already know. But for the purposes of getting ready for the season, let's revisit our favorite three receivers in the room. So Noah Thomas. Noah excels at the corner route, fades, over-the-shoulder catches, huge body. I know he's a skinnier dude. He's 6'6", but he actually has really good balance and strength with the ball in the air. I think it's a little bit overstated that he's a skinny player because I think he uses his frame really, really well. And maybe more frame would help him avoid injury, which injury slowed him down last year. He had a preseason foot injury that lingered and kind of slowed him game to game. He never gained his footing. But his body's great. It's 6'6", over the shoulder, shielding with his body, hand fights really well, and he is sneaky good with the ball in his hand. He's able to break defenders down, square up, and make a move and beat defenders. He does that with his frame. But he's just a really, really crafty receiver. That's his main strength. Ball in the air, he's doing so many things to let himself get a chance to catch these contested balls. I think he was forgotten or underutilized last season because I remember there were games last year, Tennessee game comes to mind, where on 3rd and long situations, Noah could just bail the offense out. You throw the ball up to him, and there's a chance he's going to come down with it. He's going to fight for it. You get him on a one-on-one scenario. Noah Thomas is a guy that can just win matchups. So it's extremely exciting to get him back. It's extremely exciting to see him with a clean slate because last year I mentioned the foot injury. He also had his brother passed away. So he had a very, very tumultuous season. There was a lot of stuff weighing on him, whether it was the injury itself, off the field stuff. You have to imagine that goes into it. And you add that to the offensive struggles that A&M had overall last year. Like I said, maybe he was underutilized. Maybe the quarterbacks didn't have the courage to get him the ball. Maybe they didn't have the time to get him the ball because he's definitely a later read target, being that I think he's at his best in those corner or fade routes, maybe 20 yards down the field. I think maybe given the amount of time quarterbacks had, that affected the ability to target him. But clean slate this year, new Colin Klein offense. We'll get into that later in this video, how Colin Klein can affect the receiver room. We talked about that a little bit in the Connor Wegman quarterback video. But it was very apparent in spring that Colin Klein wants to feature Noah Thomas, I believe, as wide receiver one. Now, down the stretch of last season, I think Jade Walker was your ex-receiver, your number one option at receiver. It was Jade. But I think Klein wants it to be Noah. I think he gives us our best path to high-impact play just because Noah has so much at his disposal. So in the spring game, he obviously recorded 2 touchdowns. Both are red zone touchdowns, I will add. I think Noah projects as an elite red zone threat, given his size and being how those fades and corner routes can work in the red zone. Those are touchdowns. But he was also involved in RPOs. He was involved in wide receiver screens. He was involved in wide receiver handoffs. It's more than just the fade. It's more than just the over-the-shoulder pass. It's more than the one-on-ones. They want to get him involved in a lot of ways, and I thought that was apparent in spring, and of course you have to take everything with spring with a grain of salt, but it seemed like there was an effort to make Noah the guy, and I think we're okay with that. But he's a matchup nightmare, guys. How many secondaries have one DB that can match size for size with Noah Thomas? Maybe none. Maybe none with the length. I'm sure there are stronger DBs out there, but lengthwise, like measurables-wise, you're not matching up with Noah Thomas. You're just not. So as long as the quarterback gets protection, as long as you can force one-on-one scenarios, as long as you can gain leverage, he's a lethal option. And it's going to be even harder to match up with him, given that the guy starting across the field from him, Ja'Day Walker, is 6'4" himself. So, yeah, let's talk about Ja'Day. So looking back on last year, it's honestly pretty remarkable that Ja'Day left the mark he did, because he was an unassuming transfer from Grand Valley State. Early in the year, you still had Evan Stewart. He hadn't quit yet, so Evan was there. Anias was there. Noah was there. Moose was there. But Ja'Day Walker made an impact early and often. He had 3 receptions in the opener. He blocked a punt versus Miami. Had some big games. Kind of had a lull in the middle of the season. Had a couple of drops. I think maybe just the strength of an SEC schedule, the strength of an SEC grind maybe caught up with him. But he finished the season as our best receiver. 3 80-plus yard performances in a row to close the year out. I mean, he was the best. He has a lot of stuff at his disposal. He's really just a gamer, guys. He has a nice frame. He has good speed for his frame. I don't know what his 40 time is, but as a catch-and-run threat, I would say he's underrated. We saw it in the bowl game. He can go. But just gets it done, man. Whether it's contested balls, getting hammered while he's catching a ball and still holding on to it, adjusting the balls midair on just toss-up plays that happened in LSU where Henderson was kind of getting sacked on a third and long situation, just threw the ball up. Ja'Day adjusted to the ball. The DB didn't. Ja'Day gets a first down grab on a desperation play. So he has a really, really interesting college trajectory coming from Grand Valley and making the leap he did last year. I mean, he was our second leading receiver behind Anias. And this is just a transfer that we didn't expect it from. So just incredible stuff. But what's even more impressive to me about Ja'Day than his actual wide receiver ability, which is really good, it's his value as a teammate, right? I mean, we saw Ja'Day hyping his men up, dancing with his teammates, high-fiving, just great spirits, just great vibes around Ja'Day Walker. But that's also tangible. He's a downfield blocker as a receiver. He's as good a blocker as you'll ever see at wide receiver. And the ability is one thing, but the willingness is the main thing. He's always willing to get out in front and block for his man. You see it all the time. And you don't get that very often from a receiver, especially I think there's like a stereotype that receivers can be divas. Receivers can be kind of me players. It's been a thing. You don't get that at all with Ja'Day Walker. So it's just a really good teammate to have in that room. And speaking of the room, it's a very, very mature room. These are upperclassmen we're talking about. Noah's a junior. Ja'Day, I think, is going to be a junior or a senior. Moose is going to be a senior. We'll talk about Moose in a second. Even the guys off the bench are juniors. Bostic's a junior. Cyrus Allen's a junior. So your top 5 receivers are upperclassmen, and I think that counts for a lot in today's day and age. But Ja'Day's a great blocker, and he'll be blocking, hopefully, for Moose Muhammad in open field, because we need to see Moose Muhammad get the ball in open field because he has such a nice skill set with the ball in his hand. He just makes people miss. He's strong. He's crafty. We just need to see consistency. I think he is the model for the inconsistency bug that we've been talking about amongst the receivers. It's kind of like Moose is the one that comes to mind because we've seen some high highs from Moose Muhammad, guys, right? I mean, LSU game 2022, he took over that game, man. Just otherworldly grabs, catch and run. We saw it versus Ole Miss the same year. He was building a good rapport with Connor. And Moose projects as your starting slot this year. There's no way around it. There's no, like, is he the first guy off the bench? Is he behind Anias? Is he in Jimbo's doghouse? Whatever it was before, there's some speculation in there. There's some stuff that we saw in there. He's the guy now. Now, he starts as your slot, but when you think of Moose Muhammad, it might just be me. I think of a smaller guy, like a 5'10", 5'11" build. but he plays much bigger than that. He plays like it feels like a catch radius of like a 6'3" guy with how he can jump and just extend with either arm. Moose is 6'1". I kind of forget that. He's taller than Evan Stewart was. I mean, this is a tall-ass receiver room when you look at Jade at 6'4", Noah at 6'6", and your slot at 6'1". Now, he projects as a slot, but his skill set is kind of not exactly like a prototype slot skill set. When I think of a slot receiver, I think of like an elite route runner that can take off either direction in the middle of the field, can cut on a dime, tight hands, not necessarily a huge catch radius. Moose has an insane catch radius. Like I said, jumping and the ability to snag with one hand in either direction, over the shoulder, diving, jumping, contested grabs, catching in small windows. He has all that stuff. Now, I think he has room to improve as a route runner. I think that was probably where he suffered, at least consistency-wise. But when he's at his best, great footwork, great agility, great athlete. It's not a prototype slot, but you wouldn't trade him in. Like, you'll take it. Like, that's a great skill set to have, and you can move him around. He'll do a lot of things. So what Jimbo failed to do, I think with a lot of players, even players that would be looked at as a success under A&M, like Anias and A-Chain, I think Jimbo just failed to get players in space. I think there was he never utilized the screen game. He never utilized bubble. He never utilized motion to get guys in space. And he severely underutilized Moose Muhammad. And I don't know if maybe Moose wasn't the best practice player. Maybe Moose wasn't the best off-season player. Maybe he wasn't consistent in his day-to-day life. Maybe. But I think he was definitely in Jimbo's doghouse for some reason. It usually felt like Moose had to get a couple games under his belt before he became himself. So that kind of leads me to think maybe he doesn't have the best camp. I will say this, though. Projecting into next year, it sounds like Moose is in a really good place right now. Few reasons. First of which, it's been reported by Billy Lucci, Texags, that Moose has connected with Holman Wiggins, the new wide receiver coach out of Alabama, whose best projects include Jamison Williams and Heisman winner Devontae Smith. It sounds like he has gotten through to Moose, and that's very, very positive. You need that rapport. It's Moose's last chance. Like, it's senior year. This is where you make your money, make your name. So it sounds like that's a good relationship that's already building according to the reports. But in addition to that, and in combination with that fact that Moose has had a good offseason, reported by Texags, Moose lost 10 pounds this offseason. And when I first read that, this could go either way. Is he locked in? Is this regimented? Is this intentional? Or is he not eating what he's supposed to? Is he neglecting it? I think it's a resounding answer that he was locked in this offseason. Another reason for this, early in the offseason cycle, when asked about Moose in the receiver room, Elko said that we still need to work on consistency with Moose. He still needs to work on becoming that day-to-day guy. But in media days, Elko praised Moose for what he did in the offseason. So all this information, I really think it sounded like Moose is in a really good spot to hit the year running, folks. It sounds like the sleeves are going to be on, and it sounds like Moose just might be on at the start of fall camp. So if we get a great Moose out the gates, that's a trio of receivers that could strike fear in the hearts of secondaries across the country. You could be looking at a top-tier SEC receiver trio right there. Now, of course, people are apprehensive, myself included, about the depth at receiver. So you didn't get the priority premier targets in the portal at receiver, but you did get some targets at receiver. You got some players. So according to Elko, the top two competitors to round out that rotation, maybe 5-6-man rotation that you need at receiver, I think Colin Klein, which we'll get into in a second, is going to run a lot of 2 tight end sets. I think you're going to be okay with 4 or 5 receivers in a rotation. But it sounds like, according to Elko, the ones that Drew mentioned before camp, keep in mind, camp can change things, but before camp, Elko mentioned Cyrus Allen out of La Tech, 700-plus yard receiver there, junior player, upperclassman. We saw him in spring. But he also surprisingly mentioned to me Jacob Bostic out of Iowa. Now, Cyrus Allen, somewhat of an unknown commodity in the Power 5 coming from a G5 school, but he brings that pedigree, right? Upperclassman, 700-plus yards. You're not asking him to fill a starting role. You're asking him to fill a rotational role. I think that's fine as your fourth option at receiver. That's totally fine. Bostic, not used at Iowa at all. And this was surprising to me. I thought Bostic was going to be a sophomore. Bostic's actually going to be a junior. So you have those 2 years of college weight room, college experience under his belt, which is huge, I think. I mean, I think we've learned the value of having upperclassmen on a football team. Shout out 2022. But he has a highlight reel from his Iowa practice, competitions where he was playing a lot, obviously, as a practice player. Looked really good, really big, great speed for his size, sticky hands. I mean, of course, you're only going to see the positives there in a highlight reel. Great high school highlight reel. I think he's fine to round out a rotation. I mean, we have to see it, of course. It's a very much unknown commodity, but based on the info we have and the role he's going to be asked to fill, I don't have a problem with Bostic being that fifth man. And then behind him, you have Tease, you have Isaiah Williams. Maybe Ernest Campbell can find some sort of a role, a very, very slight player going into his freshman year. I don't think you rely on him, but maybe a trick player too for Ernest Campbell, the speedster, just run away from the whole defense. But he comes in around 150. It's pretty light. But as far as rounding out that formation, with these two guys actually in your rotation, and maybe Tease and Isaiah Williams situationally. Now, Isaiah Williams, true freshman out of Florida, he did gain 8 pounds this offseason cycle. Maybe look for him to ramp up throughout later in the year. Maybe he finds a role throughout the year. But as far as just going into the year, is the receiver room good enough as is? I think it absolutely is, guys. After doing this exercise of creating this video, I am much more hopeful and excited for this receiver room than I was before. I think you have a really, really good chance to have a really, really good starting trio of receivers this year. Because before, it really wasn't their dance. It was the Aniyah Smith and Evan Stewart show last year. Make no mistake about it. Even though Noah got spring MVP, the two dudes were Aniyah and Evan. Those guys are gone. And now you look at this room as kind of like a three-man committee. And I think it's their time to play ball. I think it's going to be really, really fun, especially under Colin Klein. Now let's talk about Colin Klein to round out this video. I mentioned a little bit about Colin Klein's scheme. I talked about kind of how he's going to benefit Connor. And a lot of that stuff is going to kind of spill over to the receiver conversation as well. So we talked about pace of the offense, getting into formations faster, more effectively, allowing the quarterback to make appropriate reads, audibles, hot routes, allowing the offensive line to do the same, make their calls of the line, identify the box, identify the mic, make all their calls. I think just getting lined up around that 20-second marker versus the 15, 10, 8-second marker that Jimbo's offenses were known to do, that's a huge benefit. The ability to go fast, no huddle, actually use pace when you need to. Maybe not always, but sometimes keeps the defense off guard. The use of motion is going to be absolutely huge for the receivers, I think. Let's stop and talk about that for a second. He uses motion more than you would expect. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but if you go watch a Kansas State game, there's more motion than not. And motion does a lot of things like we talked about. It's going to allow Connor to potentially identify defensive coverages, identify man versus zone, maybe get some tells within your zone coverage. It's going to create stress points, imbalances on the side of the field you're attacking, which just benefits your offense. But he uses motion to get the receivers in their routes and on their tracks early. For instance, he'll bring a receiver into motion, snap the ball while the receiver's already running in motion, get a head start, gain leverage over man defense, gain numbers into zone defenses, overloading sides of the field. Also, occasionally creating rub routes pre-snap because the defender has to follow the man across the field and avoid his teammates to do that. You can create rubs pre-snap with motion, and snapping once the rub occurs, your receiver's already open. You're going to see that a lot with this receiver room, and it's just going to benefit them tremendously. A much more concerted effort at getting dudes the ball, I think, in advantageous positions than what we were seeing before. Before, it seemed like Jimbo wanted to make dudes fit his offense, fit what he wanted to do. But I truly feel like Colin Klein is going to feed the studs. He's going to do it. He's going to get guys in space, and he's going to use motion a lot to do it. Also, the diversity in the running game we're going to see, the diversity in the play-action game, the unique blocks and pulls and trap pulls and power scheme blocks we're going to see from the O-line. It's going to create a lot more deception. It's going to create a more effective running game, I think, as long as this O-line takes a step forward. You're going to see a more diverse RPO game, getting all of these receivers involved in that RPO option threat. Quite often, they will be in motion for those RPOs as well. you're just going to see guys in space more. I feel like you're really going to lean into their strengths. I think you're going to see Jade get in catch and run situations. I think Jade on a tunnel screen could be absolutely a nightmare. All three could, but I think Jade specifically. I think getting Moose on screens is going to be huge. Getting Moose in space is going to be huge. Getting Moose and Noah jump ball situations, one-on-one situations. Oh, speaking of the running game, he uses a lot of 2 tight end sets, and he's going to force teams to stack the box, which just creates one-on-one opportunities outside for Noah and Moose. And I think you're going to see that a lot. So play action could be absolutely lethal. Just creating one-on-ones by way of an effective running game, forcing the box, forcing the safeties down, that's going to be huge for the receiver room. So, guys, I hate to do it, but once again, as I study the room and I look more into it as we approach the season, after we learn the accountability this team has gained throughout the offseason, once again getting more and more high on this team. And this time it's the receiver room, guys. So once again, answering that initial question, is this receiver room good enough? The answer is a hell yes, it's good enough. And it could be even better than good. Now, there are some hurdles to get over. You got to find that consistency. And it sounds like it was a good offseason in cultivating that kind of environment where players are taught to be consistent and be accountable. So I think the chances are really, really good that this is a badass SEC wide receiver room led by Connor Wigman. Of course, he's back. Best quarterback you have. Best quarterback of the last 4 or 5 years. He's going to be throwing the ball. And if the offensive line improves, this whole team improves. Sky is the limit for the receiver room. So, guys, what are your expectations for the receiver room? Who's wide receiver 1? I think it's Noah. I think that was indicated in spring ball. So who do you think wide receiver 1 is? Who do you think the featured one is? Maybe they're all featured. Anything you want to say about the receiver room, let me know. And the last thing before I let you guys go today, I am doing a giveaway. This will be one of the last videos where we feature the giveaway until we do the next one. We'll be giving away this beautiful maroon welded sign. The brother to the one behind it. I had the creator, Ray's Welding Creations, make us a second one, and we're giving it away. You have to do 3 things to enter the giveaway. You have to be subscribed to this channel. You need to be following me on X, and you need to share my channel or any video that I post on X. And if you want 4 additional entries, tag up to 4 friends in whatever you share. This will be drawn for this coming Thursday, the call-in show. I'll do it live, so you guys tune in and see if you win. I think we have like 11 entries right now, and some of those 11 have multiple entries for tagging friends. So I'll ship it to you last week for this giveaway, and then we'll start the last giveaway before the season. But guys, like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you in the next video where we break down the running backs. Have a good one. Gig 'em.